Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Jelani Perkins again here with my Perks Pod podcast. I decided to make another one. I know it hasn't been too long since I posted my first ever podcast. If you haven't listened to it, go and check it out. It's a masculinity podcast where I talk about, just the concept of masculinity and where I believe it has a place in our society and just the certain ideals that people have about it. But I asked a few people on my social media to give me a topic that they might find interesting or, might want to hear. So I had one person give me a really good one. I said I was going to save it for later, but I decided to go ahead and, do it because why not? Um, so this person, a good friend of mine, lives down in Florida. He said that I should do a podcast about growing up as a military child. And I thought that was neat because a lot of people, even people that have been military children themselves or are in the military, always find certain stories interesting. And just to hear about how people grow up in the life of a military child and how people deal with that and all the different things that comes with it. And sometimes I forget that not too many people were military children. I currently live in, I would consider this, a little military city, but not everyone, grew up in the military or around it. So now, where do I start? I'll start by saying I was born in Japan, Yokota Air Force Base in Tokyo, Japan. My parents and my grandparents on both sides of my family were in the Air Force. Um, 20 years each, just about, retired from it. I think the only person who is not retired from the Air Force as of currently is my stepmother, who went in as an officer maybe about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. Um, but yeah, my grandparents were stationed in Tokyo, Japan, and that's where my parents went to their last year of high school and ended up conceiving me in Japan. Now, I did not stay in Japan long. I do not consider myself from Japan, and that is one thing about being a military child that I always find interesting is that when people ask me where I'm from, I can't give a straight answer because I really don't have a certain place where, like, oh yeah, this is where I grew up, this is where I became me. Like, I have a place where I was born, a place where I graduated high school, and just a place where I currently live. So, you know, that question where I'm from is always a weird one to answer. But I was born in Japan. Not too long after I was born, we moved straight to California, Travis Air Force Base. Um, I spent I did spend 8 years there. My first 8 years, I moved to England when I was 8. However, I did not spend those full 8 years in California, given that my mom was on deployment constantly. Yeah, I kind of, let's just say my birth kind of kickstarted both of my parents' military careers because, they had to come up with a plan on how to take care of me. Um, so my dad and my mom went into the military around the same time. I stayed with my mom. We moved to California. She would go on deployment a lot. So I would be staying with all types of people throughout deployments. I stayed with my godfather, my cousin Rashad, a lot. It's my mom's first cousin. He still lived in California, but I also lived with my Grandpa Jones and Grandma Penny. They were in Louisiana. I stayed with my Nana one time in Korea while she was in Korea for a good half a year. I stayed with my dad in Japan for half a year when they were still stationed in Japan. He personally was. And I was just all over the place. I went to 8 different elementary schools before I, entered middle school. Like, that's how many middle schools I went to, or elementary school, sorry. Yeah, 8 different elementary schools. I think one, two, two different middle schools. That one wasn't crazy. Then again, middle school is only like what 3 years. So for sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. I spent sixth grade in England and then seventh and eighth grade in Virginia. Um, but yeah, I left California when I was 8. Went to go to England. Got stationed at Mildenhall Air Force Base. Um, England was a different experience. I actually want to go back there because as a little kid, the only thing I wanted to do was go outside and play all the time. But England, if anyone knows anything about it, is not go outside and play weather, especially not consistently enough. The crazy thing is the clearest, the times where there were, clear sunny skies, the most days in a row was after a heavy snowfall. Now we took advantage of that, of course. Don't get me wrong. I was outside, you know, making snowmans all up and down the street and, that kind of stuff. Cause it would snow pretty heavy, during the winter every year. But, when it came to stuff like summertime and especially the springtime, you didn't really get to go out much because it was always raining and the weather would just change so quickly. You could go into a store, not a cloud in the sky, come out 20 minutes later, it's storming. It was definitely something that they call Georgia weather bipolar. Um, but there was nothing more bipolar, no weather more bipolar than England because while Georgia would change day to day, England would change hour to hour, and that's just how it was. But yeah, I always wanted to go outside and play. I didn't care too much for the cultural aspect and learning about the culture and the just the history of it because that's what England is really. That's the fascinating part about England is the history, the culture, the castles, the sightseeing. But as a kid, I really didn't care about that stuff. So there was not too many things that I got excited for as a kid in England. I think like maybe the most exciting thing about England was they had an indoor water park in the London area called Alton Towers, and the place was huge and it was really fun. So we loved going there. Oh, that and Legoland. Um, I stayed in England for about 4 years. There was one year throughout the 4 years, my fifth grade year, that I spent in Louisiana with my dad when he got stationed there in Barksdale. Spent a year with him. Now, the funny thing about when I went to Barksdale with my dad for a year, Shreveport area, it was the first time I had met another Jelani. First ever time. I found out he was in my grade. I didn't never had a class with him, but someone brought to my attention that he was there. And this is the really crazy part. I met him in Louisiana when I went to my dad for a year. The next year, my sixth grade year, going into middle school, I was in England, went back to England with my mom, chilling in class, keyboarding class. Next thing you know, my teacher comes up behind me. He says, "Hey, I know this is probably a far stretch, but I wanted to ask if you possibly know this guy." And as I'm turning, he says, his name is Jelani too. It's the same kid that I met in Louisiana. When I tell you, I was like, yo, what? And then I cracked a joke. I was like, bro, did you follow me here? And then he laughed because I did introduce myself to him before, the school year was over. So I met him, he met me. We knew about each other, didn't really know each other like that. Even after that interaction, I don't think we really, you know, became friends, but we were cool. So that was always a neat little funny thing that happened. But once sixth grade year was over, oh, and sixth grade was when I first started getting into acting. In England, that was my first play, sixth grade. I played a mayor for I can't remember what the production was called, but I played the mayor. Had a little top hat, suit, and everything. Um, it was like something that took place in like the 1800s. If I had to pick a time, and it was so sad because my voice, my projection was really good, and I could really put that out there, but my body was stiff as a board. I didn't move. I barely moved, barely pivoted, didn't move my hands, arms at all. They were just to my side the whole time. I was dull, physically dull performance. But it was fun, and that really kind of kick-started my actual acting because I was in musicals from the time I was 5 all the way up until then. And then honestly, I got tired of musicals. Um, I don't know. I just wanted to do something that actually had like that I actually felt was my like me performing instead of being like part of an ensemble or something like that. But yeah, after 6th grade, we moved to Virginia. Um, Virginia, that move was probably the roughest part of my life when it comes to being a kid, being social, being in school. In England, we were part of me and my sister. She's about 4 years younger than me, so um, you get into the youth center when you're 5, and you have to get leave when you're 13. I never got old enough to leave, but when I hit 9 years old and she became 5, we were in the same youth center. Um, my mom took us out a little early, so we were out of the youth center maybe almost half a year before we even left England. And during that whole time, I did mostly just staying indoors, playing video games, um, eating, just being indoors and not really being the normally active person that I am. So I gained quite a bit of weight. I became overweight for my age and just overall not as healthy as I should have been. And we made the move to Virginia, and this will be the first time that I dealt with uh, the American school system in a minute. And in England, I never really had trouble with bullies, like ever. Of course, you had a couple of, you know, idiots and a couple of little kids that were just a little over the top. The most people that gave me trouble, most kids that gave me trouble were actually, little girls, and I just ignored them. My mom taught me about how to deal with that kind of stuff. I did have anger issues as a kid. Third and fourth grade, I got in trouble a lot for getting into altercations with kids, and I kind of mellowed out by the time I got to middle school. Um, and going to Virginia with my newfound gained weight, I was also a weird kid, still am weird, and I was new. I was just an easy target, easy pickings for bullies that really didn't care about other kids' feelings because, that's how middle schoolers are. So I got there and I decided to do football. And in England, they didn't have tackle padded football for anyone under high school age. It was all flag. Meanwhile, you come to the States, you can start tackle football when you're freaking 5. So I wanted to get into football. I was always really good at flag football. I was always a running back. Now, with this newfound gained weight that looking back on it, I honestly didn't even realize that that had happened to me like that. So I was still in the mindset that, oh, I'm going to be a running back. I'm going to be a wide receiver. And I kept trying to go out for those positions, and they would never put me in those positions. And I'm just sitting here like, why, bro? Like, why do this? And the crazy thing is, I still had a little bit of my speed, and I was still nimble enough on my feet, but I just didn't have the build for it. You know, I was probably in my head looking at myself like, yeah, I'm gonna be a running back, or a fullback, some kind of wide receiver option, maybe play the 9 slot. And my coach is sitting here looking at me like, hey, bro, we might put you on a line. And I never registered that until it actually happened, and they really did was like, hey, why don't you take a crack at the line? And the sad thing was I was pretty good at it. If I was maybe taller with the same build, I would have been really good at it. But it was not that good of an experience. And they never played me really, uh, almost at all. Those 2 years of middle school, I think maybe 7th grade, I didn't play all in anything but 2 games, maybe for a total of 2 plays, and then 8th grade I played a little bit more, but I just stopped playing football after that. But back to the me being easy pickings for these bullies out here. When I got to Virginia Beach in 7th grade, I was fat, new, weird, all that good stuff. Um, I danced into my first class. Like, that's how weird I was. Nobody knew me. Nobody knew who I was. I think maybe only two people actually like thought it was a good type of weird, me dancing into my first class, but everybody looked at me and was like, "Yeah, this kid's annoying." And I was I don't know. I was just in a weird space. I didn't realize what had happened to me. I still thought that I was, you know, in shape, or I wouldn't say I didn't think I thought that I was in shape. I would say that I didn't realize how out of shape I got. And then just, I don't think I had a real awareness of, how other kids would really perceive me. And I think the real thing that I messed up on was when it comes to those kids in middle school and stuff like that, there's not a problem with being weird. It's a problem with being weird too quick, because there was some popular people, there's some popular kids, and when I tell you, like, they were on a different level of weird, like, I would even look back now and be like, those were some weird ass kids. But here's the thing, they became popular or cool with the right people before they started to really show their full extent of weirdness. So that was already acceptable for them. I showed my full extent when nobody knew me. So it was just like, who is this weird kid? And it wasn't fun. Um, my main bully, he was on the football team with me, so technically I was already getting bullied before the school year even started, because football practices I think started maybe a month before school did. And I was physically and verbally bullied 24/7, 7th and 8th grade. It didn't stop. 7th grade, when I had my anger issues as a kid, my mom taught me that I needed to dial back, especially with words and stuff. And I think that my child brain processed it too literally. And I dialed back too much, to the point where, yeah, I didn't need to put my hands on someone when they were just talking or making verbal comments, but I also started to become timid to the point where, people were putting their hands on me and I wasn't doing anything about it. It's so crazy how I look back on it. I was literally getting pushed in the back down the entire hallway while teachers were standing at the doorway, and no one ever saw this stuff happen. It really blew me. I went to the guidance counselors maybe about 3, 4 times with my mom, telling them about this one person who was physically bullying me. And they kept saying, okay, we'll take care of it, take care of it. Nothing ever happened. So, about 3/4 of the way through 7th grade year, um, he catches me outside of PE after leaving, picks up my book, drops it, and said, "What you gonna do about it?" And out of nowhere, I snapped. I threw my binder at him, and it basically exploded. And I punched him in his stomach, and I tried to tackle him. Not gonna lie, at one point in time, I don't even remember it because I didn't like black out, but like when I went into fight mode, I didn't remember a lot of it. At one point, apparently, he punched me in my face, put me in a headlock, and then I kind of like, while I was in a headlock, I reached my arm above and behind his neck and started pulling down on his neck. So it was almost like we had each other in like a neck lock. Now, I will admit that if no one came to break it up, eventually I probably might have lost that fight. Because this kid was he was actually training in mixed martial arts outside of school. And you have me, a kid who has never done anything like that in his life, didn't really get into fights. Like, yeah, I, you know, hurt a couple of kids when I was younger, but that was like the little one moment push ahead into a wall or knock them down kind of thing. It wasn't like an actual fight. But yeah, I was at a disadvantage, but our PE teacher came out. Apparently someone told him that we had an altercation inside the locker room at first, and someone went and got him, and then he broke it up, and they brought us to the office, ended up getting suspended, of course, for a few days. Um, but yeah, that was really fun. Um, Once that happened, I turned into a completely different person, in a good way. Um, I stopped caring what people said. I learned how to stand up for myself, even if I felt like I wasn't physically going to beat the other person. I didn't allow people to make me feel inferior anymore. And if they had something to say, um, and had if it had no merit, especially, or if it didn't, as long as they didn't put their hands on me, it just became a lot easier to deal with that kind of stuff and just ignore them. And yeah, I became a menace too, because a lot of people in my eighth grade year didn't like me or acted some type of way towards me because of stuff they heard about me from other people. Like there was a girl who had a crush on me, like an actual crush on me in eighth grade, and because she heard from other people that I was annoying or whatever, and she was like, and those were her friends saying, "Oh, he's annoying. Oh, he's this and that." She started to change how she acted towards me, and I noticed that, and I was just like, you know what? I don't even care at this point because why do you matter? And don't get me started. Like once you try to verbally like come after me, I will actually go out my way to annoy you even more because that's what you get. Like ain't nobody ask you to intrude on my peace, on my happiness. So if you tried to do that, I became a social menace and didn't care. Um, Once eighth grade was over, actually in the middle of eighth grade, we had an assembly. In Virginia Beach, there's a lot of high schools with academies, and there was like a tech academy. There was the one I went to, the Visual and Performing Arts Academy. There was a science academy, stuff like that. And each school had one academy, and we had an assembly saying which schools had which. As soon as it popped up, um, I saw the Visual Performing Arts Academy and said, "That's where I want to go." Um, I mentioned acting earlier. That sixth grade is when I started. Seventh grade, I actually won a Best Actors performance for our one acts in Virginia. Probably one of the highlights of my middle school career, but it is what it is. So yeah, I ended up going to Salem High School in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Visual Performing Arts. I did try out for both the art strand and theater strand. Only made it into the theater strand. Uh, I At one point I did want to try out for the dance strand, but I think that my style of dance, I like to do hip hop dancing, you know, crumping, all that stuff, pop and lock, but like the type of dancing that was in this academy was actually very extensive and very diverse. You had a few people that were really good at that, but it was a lot of focus on modern and interpretive dancing. And I just passed, and I was like, no, I'm good. But yeah, I went into the theater strand, fit in with the rest of the weirdos. Um, I mean, I loved high school. I barely had any bad uh, confrontations. If anything, I had more issues with some of the teachers than the actual students. Never really had any bullying go on. That's where I met a couple more Jelanis. At one point, there were three Jelanis in that school. There was the one who was a grade above me as a junior. So he was a senior, I was a junior, and then the third Jelani came in as a freshman on my junior year. So that was cool. Because of the first Jelani that was there, though, I immediately became not popular, but immediately people started to know who I was only because they were like, "Oh, there's another Jelani in the school," and he was kind of a popular dude, really cool dude too. He was in the dance strand, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. High school was a lot of fun. And then the crazy thing is, even after graduating high school, my movements as a military kid didn't even stop there. My parents, or at least my stepdad, ended up getting stationed at at Robins Air Force Base here in Warner Robins. So when him and my mom got married, they already made the decision that after I graduated, they were going to move down here. So I ended up, to have a little bit of help if I needed to, or to have familiarity in the area, I decided to move down here with them and go to school at MGA. Um, my mom ended up retiring, or my stepdad ended up retiring first, and then my dad ended up retiring in Las Vegas. They ended up getting stationed in Las Vegas. He was a recruiter for a couple years before getting before retiring as a tech sergeant, and then my mom retired after that. Now my stepmom, she got into the military as an officer after my dad. It was either right when or right after my dad retired, and then before my mom retired, because she retired maybe like a couple, what was it, like a year and a half ago? And then my dad retired, I think, because I went to, yes, so I went to Vegas for my dad's retirement. So I was about 20. So this was about 4 years ago. He retired about 4 years ago. Um, Being a military kid was really fun. It was definitely came with its challenges. I definitely envy. Well, I don't want to say envy because that's kind of a negative word, but I definitely, um, you know what? No, I definitely envy some of the people who can say, "Hey, this is where I grew up. Like, I have a place where I'm from. Like, this is where I grew up. That's my hometown or whatever." I don't have that. I don't have a hometown that I can really, really claim. I think if anything, probably Virginia Beach would be the most likely to be claimed a hometown, but that's only because I think other than now in Warner Robins, that's where I spent the most of my time as a growing young man, and that's where I graduated high school. But the crazy thing is, I still feel like I became a lot of who I am even before I even got there. So it's like one of those things where if I had to say where my hometown was, it would be Virginia Beach, but I still don't consider that to be my hometown. I don't have any friends that I can say, hey, like this is my childhood friend, like we grew up together, like I like we went to daycare and elementary school and graduated high school together. Now, don't get me wrong, my longest time, best friend, my longest time friends are, going on 10 years, but, and that is a good time. That's a good long time, but, you know, I wasn't around nobody for like most of my life. I don't have like true childhood friends. My best friend in this world, I didn't know him till I was 15. I was already kind of like my own person. I didn't get to see him grow. He didn't get to see me grow. Now, we've seen each other grown as young men, young adults, but as a person, I didn't get to see that. Um, you know, that and the fact that, you just don't really have a place to just go back to and be like, yeah, this is my spot. However, despite that, I do think that there's more pros that came with being a military child. My love for travel. I love to travel. I love riding on planes. I love plane rides. I love to go different places. I love to see different things. I love to experience different cultures. And I think that helped stem from me being a military child and seeing so many different places and meeting so many different people. And no one place is the same. There's of course similar people, but no one place ever felt like, oh, this is like living here. Even within the states, England was its own experience. Korea was its own experience. Even though I was really young in Korea, I can still remember a little bit. Japan was its own experience, even though I want to go back so bad. California, Louisiana, Virginia, um, all those places had just different vibes and different environments to them. Um, Me being able to be a social chameleon, I think a lot of that is due to just who I am as a person. Inherited that from my parents, but also being in the military helped me interact with so many different types of people that it definitely, I feel like, wasn't the reason why I'm able to be a social chameleon, but it was definitely a foothold in my ability to do that. Because, if you stay in one place for too long, you just start to, you know, meet and talk with the same types of people uh, constantly. And when you're always moving and always meeting different types of people, you get to kind of explore a little bit and see what kind of people you roll with and see, what kind of personalities that really vibe with your character. And I have my certain personalities that, definitely I synchronize with better, but doing so, moving around, has helped me be able to interact with all different types of people. Um, another pro is that it's just neat. It's just great to have so many stories of different places and talk to people about these different areas and different people. Um, I have so many experiences that a lot of people, don't have. Like, I still have friends that have never, been on a plane. I have a couple of acquaintances that haven't even been outside of their hometown. And looking back on it, as a kid, I used to be like, why couldn't I just have one place where I could be or stay or grow up? But as an adult, looking back on it, I'm actually glad that I had this life because it seems almost boring. Um, Being an adult now, being in Warner Robins for as long as I have, I have that itch to get up and go somewhere and to just visit places and not to just be in one space. And, that's just the person I became because of the military. Is what I've learned to be accustomed to, and just what I've learned really gets me going is just being in different environments, meeting different people. Is to me, it was definitely much more pros than cons. If it wasn't for the military, I wouldn't have met my best friend who, honestly, Ryan Purebaugh, I love him to death. He is the white me. I tell him and his mom this, and I love their family, and he is me, just white and country version. Like, the only difference between us is just our hobbies. Like, that's it. Um, and I absolutely love that dude to death. I have other friends that I met, due to me moving around. Nick, Cambrell, people with, so many different ideologies and also dreams, and just to see them doing their own thing, and meeting people here like my boy Philip, just having people that I've met with dreams and goals and similar drives to just gel with, and people that I can call brothers for life. And you know, I don't know. I won't say that I wouldn't have gotten that if I would have stayed in one place, but um, it's definitely something that I cherish and something that I wouldn't give up for the world. Because at the end of the day, all those guys that I mentioned, and plus some that I didn't mention, they're family. You know, my friends, my true friends, I don't call them friends, I call them brothers. And that, I helped gain those connections through the military. So I'm thankful for the military. I'm thankful for people that served in the military, thankful for their service. I'm thankful for my parents, for my grandparents. Yeah, sometimes it may not have been the easiest thing. It may not have been their choice, well, I would say they're not saying it like they were forced into the military, but it was just one of those things where they didn't have too many options. But the military has been very good to my family. It's been very good to me. Um, like I said, we had our tough moments. My mom, before she went reserves in the active duty, there's a lot of time she spent away from me in my younger years, and my sister a little bit. And, you know, bless her, she wanted to get away from that system of always being away from her children so often, and she ended up joining the reserves to spend more time with us. which I absolutely commend her for. But even with those tough deployments and always being away from your family members a lot, um, it taught me a lot of things, and it helped toughen me up. It helped me become the person that I am, and I wouldn't be, in my opinion, as great of a person as I am without the military. So, to those who are in the military, to those families who go through the same things, or even worse things when things happen in the line of duty, I commend you guys, and I have the utmost respect for military and what they do for us. Um, so yeah, that's just a little bit of what it's like for me, growing up as a military child, and never regretted it. Uh, I have so many things to be thankful for, and at the end of the day, I am who I am because of it. So I am glad that you guys tuned in to listen to this. Got a little bit of insight on who I am as a person, as well as what the military has done for me. Um, I do ask that you go visit my YouTube at Perks Corner. If you're listening to this through Spreaker, I have the whole audio on my YouTube, and it will be there to comment, leave comments, and give me any advice as to how to make these podcasts more engaging. And if you guys have any more topics that you'd like me to cover, talk about, engage with y'all, just let me know in the comments. But I thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys another time.